Namaste and a very good evening. I'm your host Sharan Citti, and this is the Festival of Bharat. Today we are joined by Anuj Dhar ji for a conversation. Many of you may have read and heard his works on Lal Bahadur Shastri ji and Subhash Chandra Bose's mystery for a very long time. And today we are going to be discussing a range of subjects with him, and I look forward to this conversation. Anuj ji, thank you so much for joining us. Namaste, and I hope everything is.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for having me here. Thank you very much.
Anuji, first of all, why are you so passionate about Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose? Because you have been following this subject for the last 20 years and you've been constantly speaking about it, writing about it. And this has become your life's mission to declassify and to bring about some transparency as to what happened with Netaji, Subhash Chandra Bose.
Difficult to answer, but I never thought that way 20 years ago. So it was not a plan as such that I had in my mind that I would do this thing now so many years. But then as it goes with the research, whichever topic you might pick up today, usually research lasts for the lifetime. I might be interested in, let's say, the coins of the Gupta era. So I would continue my research my whole life. So research by itself means you need to devote a huge chunk of your life. And in this case, I never planned to do. In fact, I even tried to run away from this case in between. There were times I did not want to pursue it, but then as fate would have it, probably it was the will of the whichever powers there on the top that I should continue with this case.
Why is there this system of secrecy in India, especially when it comes to our history? I mean, for strategic affairs, I can understand to a certain degree that if there is classification, involved in the sense of classifying certain events and certain things. But even in the West, if they're classified, they declassify that after a certain period of time, and it's been more than 75 years. So is there something wrong systematically in the way we approach these things?
Nothing wrong systematically, because we follow the same protocols as you do, because whatever system we have were brought here by the British. So on paper, we have the same records, we have the same protocols that we would declassify information after 25 years. But then the basic reason why somebody would hide is to keep things secret is, of course, something has done something wrong. Otherwise, there was no reason for example, my own government to keep hiding things, keep telling lies, which they are continuing even today. And so that's and Subhash Bose's case is very, very extraordinary. Not because I have studied, because I don't see any other case like of this magnitude, which has been running for past 75 odd years, which covers so many governments. This is not just about Panditji. This is all about. I mean, in fact, it is more about Modiji today. My complaint is not about Prime Minister Nehru. Miss Panditji is no more. Panditji died 50 years ago. More than that, I'm concerned with what the government is doing today. And it has got many dimensions, many many directions that this case goes. This is not just about something happening 75 years ago. It is about many things which happened over a period of time. And so it's fairly complicated. And yet, but you're correct that we do have a symptomatic desire to keep things secret. And one of the reasons we want to keep things secret, I imagine it started. Let's start with the very start, with the transfer of power. The narrative which we have been given in our country, that India became free, like Independence Day, 15 August, and you have unfurling of the national flag, the Union Jack going down, and so on and so forth. Well, the things were not like that actually. Union Jack did not go down that day, and we didn't get freedom. We were dominion status. Now, most people are not even aware of what is dominion status. People are not even aware of the basic facts of history. For example, Gandhiji never wanted Puran Swaraj. He wanted dominion status, like Canada has got a dominion status. New Zealand has got the dominion status. And Subhash Bose and Mahatma Gandhi were were not on same page when it came to this particular facet of our history. So this is very, so the can of worms will open up if you start. I mean, even if you start with 15th of August 1947. So I believe government has good reasons to hide things, and it's been happening over the years. And what happens that when you've been hiding something, when you tell one lies, to cover one lies, you have to come up with multiple lies.
Right.
And then that's what's been happening. And this whole thing has, built up over the years. And now it's very difficult even for this government right now to uncover everything, because when you open a can of worms, you never know which worm will, come from which direction.
But that's something, that's exactly what people are asking, people like you, Anuji. what does this
Not
particular
only we are
government?
asking, we have the evidence. I mean, not only we are asking, not only we, what has changed in, in our times,
Hmm.
is that what we
No, but
probably heard when we were children, and probably what was talked about, let's say in 1950s, 16, 70s, and even
yeah.
later, that India, didn't become free. We were under the British in one way or the other. Now we have a lot of information data which is on record, and which in hindsight, when we look at it, it's pathetic. In fact, to give you an example, when we were growing up, we used to hear this story about, there were some sort of secret protocols, secret clauses of the transfer of power, by which the power was transferred by the British, to those Indians who were pally with them. And people made all kind of allegations. These allegations were published even in mainstream media, like the newspapers in those days, that there were some secret clauses, with secret protocols of the transfer of power, which were not conveyed to people of India by the uh, powers that be. And one of the protocols concerned Subhash Chandra Bose, that if he were to return to India, or if he were found alive, he would be handed over to the British or the Allied, forces, something like. So these kind of allegations were, making rounds, and they were even given publicity in mainstream newspapers in those days. The government of India never ever opened its mouth on this issue. Even in our time, they have not said a word about it. And that is despite the fact that, our government and our leaders, they go all over the world, and they keep talking about the virtues of, always telling the truth, and, and non-violence and ahimsa, non-violence and truth, which they keep harping upon, but they never convey this thing to people of our country. Now something, dramatic happened, in by 2009. Well, the genesis go back to 9/11. After 9/11, the as you remember, the American CIA had failed to, give a proper warning. They did not share the information with the FBI. That was one reason, the 9/11 happened. Thereafterward, like, CIA came under, a lot of criticism. And but over a period of time, people realize that if you keep criticizing your own security agency, is not good for your country. You demoralize those people, and whatever happens, the intelligence organizations, whenever do something good, it doesn't get publicized. But whatever negative thing happens, they get all the bad press. So it's not good for them. So they should be, their good thing should be projected. So in America, a trend started whereby they began, coming with books which were cleared by the agency, and they came up with the movies to show the CIA in good light, and show, look, we have been doing good things as well, but they were never publicized. I believe similar thing happened in England, and similar things happening in India right now, that you're trying to project the good sides. And I'm sure the books which are coming out about India's intelligence agencies are cleared by the government. They are not happening on their own. The government is definitely behind it, but it's good. It's in national interest. I'm not against it. The point is, something similar thing happened in England, and the MI5, the British intelligence agency, uh, they came out with an authorized history of whatever they were doing for their country. And they hired a very well-known professor of, espionage and intelligence, Christopher Andrews, who had previously worked on the Mitrokhin archive. Christopher Andrews was given oath of secrecy, and he was shown classified documents from the MI5, and he came out with the authorized history of the MI5, which is now available all over the world, including in India. It's a pretty thick book. Now there, I believe, either by mistake or by design, God knows, so they accepted the fact that in 1947 there were secret clauses to the transfer of power, about which my government has never told me a single thing. MI5 was good enough to tell the world the clause which concerns them. And this clause, under this clause, uh, an office was opened in Delhi, security liaison office. And this office was like super boss to the IB. And Indian Intelligence Bureau was supplying all the information to their former masters after independence. And this trend continued until 1968. So this is now coming, the part that there was a secret clause. And under that clause, MI5 opened an office in Delhi, and that this office continued until 1968. We did not come to know about it from anybody in India. This is coming from the British. So my suspicion now, of course, is now very clear that if they have hidden one clause, there must be other clauses as well. So once you're caught, with on one point, there must be 500 other things you must have done something wrong. So this is a matter of record now. The MI5 admits, and the worst thing is that when I asked the government of India about it under the RTA, I got no answers. They refuse to answer the questions, and the same people and the same system, goes all over the world, on our money. By the way, don't forget, it's not their personal money. all the money which they use for publicity is coming from people of India. I don't mind if they use their own party fund or something else, but they use public money, and they're, Tom bought big things. They go to United Nations and talk about that these are the principles we're supposed to follow. We are the people of truth, we are the people of ahimsa, and you are seeing for yourself that ever since the war has started in Ukraine, these people are not nowhere to be seen. They're doing nothing about it. Yeah. But once the war is finished in Ukraine, they will start again tom-tomming the same thing. You should be following the path of non-violence and non-so. And the poor people will never get the Nobel Peace Prize. They have never got in last 70 years. They will never get. That's my prediction.
But why? What does the Narendra Modi government have to hide? Especially because the BJP is a much more modern party compared to the Congress. And the Congress, especially with its association with Subhash Chandra Bose, perhaps have had so many things to hide.
There are two ways of looking at it. Number one, a conversation I had with somebody, so that conversation was to the effect that, look, we had issues such as Article 370 on our agenda for last 20-30 years. Yet it took us a lot of time, because these are not easy things which could be done easy. It's easier said than done. So you have to keep in mind a lot of implications on the foreign funds, so on and so forth, and you have to look for the right time, right opportunity. And it's only then we were able to do it, even though we could have done it on day one, but we could not. It took us some time. And this view, which was conveyed to me, that give us some time. This is not a simple thing. It's very complicated. It's multi-layered. It has got a lot of foreign implications and so forth. So that is one way of looking at it. The other, which I have to say on the basis of the fact which are there in front of me right now, the BJP hasn't changed the official narrative of the Indian side. I mean, there's nothing has changed. I mean, I believe the former minister of HRD was publicly, proclaiming that he has changed not a word in the Indian history. So the problem with the system, that for last 70, 80 years, the system has towed a certain line. It's very difficult for them to turn around one fine morning, even if the government top people change. And especially the bureaucracy which guides the government of the day. And they have nothing to gain by talking about Subhash Bose. Now, the biggest advantage with, for example, the problem with Subhash Chandra Bose's story, it is not sellable in America and Europe. Today, if you make the whole thing public, it might thrill people of India, but it will not make people in the West very happy. And the problem with the Subhash Bose story is another problem. The problem is that once you have the facts coming out, be it the issue of his death or otherwise, in whichever way you make the facts public, eventually it will come down to the fact that India became free because of this man. But the credit for India's freedom was transferred to Mahatma Gandhi. And when that happens, again the problem, there's a clash. The Indian ruling class and the elite are more interested in what will probably sell in the Western countries. And Gandhi brand, the biggest advantage with it, it's sellable in America and Europe. And our entire, I'm not saying that everybody is like Westernized, but then the basic fact of the matter is that the entire Indian ruling class and the elite are essentially Westerners. They are sitting in India, but their families and souls are living in Western countries. They probably wouldn't want to bring about such a massive change in the narrative. And we saw this thing recently when Prime Minister Modi announced, which I think is a very encouraging sign, that Netaji statue would be put up in Rajpath. We will talk more about it, a little later. And when that happened, suddenly you saw that people, Western media people, and also our Malini madam, in Chennai, the Hindu editor, whatever, she was speaking the same language as if she's living in New York City. She's not living in Chennai. So there's a problem with the Indian elite, and these are people who wield the power in the country. They are the running, and in fact, I remember again, thinking on the same line, when Prime Minister Modi thought of changing, certain names of certain parts of Andaman and Nicobar. People did not like this in their PMO, because they're still, people are still victim of the wartime propaganda, the British propaganda about the Japanese. They tend to believe the British, not Japanese, not Subhash Bose. So that's so here a huge problem. System itself is not ready. I would draw an analogy between, you saw this very famous movie, The Matrix, Keanu Reeves, first part, not the latest one. I didn't like it. The first part was, it's a make-believe world, which was, built over 70, 80 years. To dismantle this matrix is not that easy. And so that's
you're absolutely right. And especially if we look at the observations of a few faculty members from different South Asian studies departments, we've seen them misappropriating and creating false equivalences of Netaji. that's akin to being a dictator, or his meeting with Hitler. So there's already an effort to defame him, as in when people are taking
this
more and
this
more interest
this
about
was this
Netaji.
this this effort has been ongoing for last many generations. Only today we get to hear it very clearly because today we have social media. This has been ongoing. I mean, in fact, even in Subhash Chandra Bose's home state, Calcutta, in Bengal, Calcutta, people in media write this thing openly. I cannot imagine somebody would write the same thing, let's say in Punjab, about Netaji or Bhagat Singh. But in Bengal, very well, people have been openly castigating Subhash Chandra Bose, writing editorials in the newspapers and saying what you have just said. And nobody bothers to, there's a very famous bird called context. Nobody talks about context. In fact, the most of the Gandhians were unaware of this bird. They discovered this bird only when there was an attack on Mahatma Gandhi, that Gandhiji was being racist when he attacked the blacks in South Africa, and suddenly they discovered there was a bird called context. They said, look, you have to context, to think of the context. That's what my friend, we have been talking for past so many decades. When you talk of Subhash Chandra Bose, you have to keep in mind the context. The context of when he said dictator, for example, when we think of dictator today, we think of our friend in North Korea. When I say our friend, that means our government is friendly with him. So don't forget that. We give people a lot of lectures.
Yeah.
Today, I think the Americans have declared Putin to be a war criminal.
Mm.
But isn't India siding with Putin? Of course, we are siding with Russia because we have all the sympathy for Ukrainians, and we have our people, students, and we have so much of, we are all, traumatized seeing what's happening there. But the fact of matter remains that Russia is our closest ally. We cannot let go of our own ally. Tomorrow, if there's an attack on us, of course, we'll have to bank up on our ally. So what matters in the when you deal with foreign countries is your national security comes first, your national interest come first. So that's what So Subhash Chandra Bose, when he, for example, the word dictator, what it means today was not what it meant when Subhash Bose used it. Even Mahatma Gandhi used the word dictator for himself. Most people don't know this thing. By dictator, Mahatma Gandhi ji meant that he would be a very strong leader. That's all, nothing more. So today, when you think of dictatorship, you think in terms of the North Korean dictator, or you think of Saddam Hussein, you think of Adolf Hitler, so on and so forth. But in the context of Subhash Chandra Bose, he never, and he was in favor of, having them. He was democratic, all these things, and he never mentioned any. There's no this whole theory about Netaji, some claim about Netaji, asking for dictatorship in India is based on nothing. There's no evidence. Right. These are all allegations which are not proven. And in all the same, the word dictatorship used in those days, which Gandhiji also used, was the context was different. It meant strong leadership, which we all want even today. And Gandhiji was a strong leader.
Right. And how do you think, if the truth about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is to come out today, how do you think that will impact the soft power of India? Because India theorizes Gandhi everywhere around the world. It uses for its brand makeover whenever convenient. So it almost reflects a very pacifist, defeatist attitude, if I have to be brutally honest. But the Western perception of Netaji is already so wrong. So do you think, again, this will be portrayed as a sign of changing India, which is growing more fascist, etc.?
You're so correct, and you're answering the question which you asked me. So this is one part of the problem. What do? You will, remove the, the Gandhi brand will take a massive hit if the truth is told. But Gandhi brand cannot be replaced because Subhash Chandra Bose or Veer Savarkar, they are not the entities which can be marketed in Western countries. Mahatma Gandhi can be. So that's a big problem, and that is how the system is taking such a long time. But then at the end of the day, we will have to think of India first. We will have to, probably, I recall when President Obama came to India and he addressed our American president came to India and he addressed our parliament. He opened with Jai Hind. I'm sure his advisor must have told him that how Jai Hind was coined and how it became well known. Gandhiji did not give the call of Jai Hind. So Indians they couldn't come up with anything. In fact, it was Subhash Chandra Bose in Nazi Germany who adopted this national salutation. So I'm sure once we start giving Netaji, respect, and we tell the people the truth. I have been traveling to America giving lectures. Once you, and those people also and done, people in West are fair. They will appreciate our facts, they understand, and you have to give them. But my problem is, I don't see our foreign service, our people, they are willing to do that thing. Their focus, I'm sorry to tell you, is mostly about how to settle their own children in those countries. They give us, pontificate about online movement and SARC and whatnot, but when it comes to their own children's future, they always, they will go by. So I find, unfortunately, in my own experience, I find no inclination on the part of the our foreign ministry to project Netaji and to try and reason with people. When they make some negative comments about him, so tell them the facts. I find that completely missing because this has been happening for generations now. So probably it will take some time.
Yeah. So if there was a count on, how many people have complained about the bureaucrats sitting in South Delhi, in the South Block, I think it would be more than what Virat Kohli has scored in his entire career. So the general attitude is so boring and it's so lazy.
No, but I'm not against. I admire them, in fact, people. But my only problem with them, when it comes to Subhash Chandra Bose, I mean, they are. Don't get me wrong, they are nationalist and all that. But when it comes to Netaji, I find this tendency of viewing Netaji from the Western eyes. So that's something which I find very unnerving and very disturbing. So
Right.
don't ever view Subhash Chandra Bose or whatever happened Second World War from the eyes of the Westerners, because you are not living in West. For example, typical, I would way of looking at it. What was India's core national interest in 1940? Was it to become free, or was it to bring peace for the mankind, which Gandhiji stood for? No, of course, our interest was never, not then, not today, is not to bring peace for mankind. It is to become independent, become strong first. But the problem that the idea of talking about peace for the mankind sells in glitzy meetings, and just like you have these Miss Universes contests and all these beauty pageants, and the ladies are asked questions, what do you want to be, and they always come at the UK, they want to do social service, they yearn for the world peace. You know it and I know it, they are all not very interested in the world peace. They So that's becomes very it becomes very fashionable to talk about these things, to sing John Lennon song that you seek peace and all that. It means nothing. Whereas we have the very good example of what's happening in the Ukraine right now, that we have our leadership from prime minister to our honorable vice president, that the Gandhian principles are valid even today. Our foreign secretary is making statement in the United Nations that the Gandhiji has bequeathed to us principles like non-violence, and we can resolve issues which nobody can do. Please show me how. I've heard enough. I've been hearing for the last 70 years. Give me a simple example, single example. When did India use this weapon? Did we use it in Kashmir? No. Did we use it in Goa? No. Did we use it against Pakistan? No. So then why keep talking about it? Just because selling in the Western countries. And now, of course, as the war is progressing, nobody's talking about it. Once the war is over, they will come around and they'll start talking the same old thing. And, it's fashionable. And my problem is not that it's a free country. People can say what they want. But my problem, and the reason why, people like me have taken somewhat, negative, stand against Gandhiji, the brand built around him, is that you don't give others space. So much of public money is consumed. We can talk more about it in, on this particular, narrative, as if there's no other narrative in this country, which has made people rather angry and annoyed. And that's reflection you are seeing when I talk to you.
Anuji, let's get into the crux of what you have been saying for the last 2 decades. Uh, how do we still believe that Gumnami Baba was Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose indeed? Because this is something that you've been asked time and again. But once you start your answer, I'm going to ask a few more follow-ups after that.
Why should we believe the Gumnami Baba was Subhash Chandra Bose? First of all, the official view of Netaji's death is that he died in the plane crash in Taiwan, which was the story given out by Japanese, which initially not believed by anybody, including Mahatma Gandhi and then Pandit Nehru. And somehow Panditji came to believe it. And then it became the official narrative of the government of India. And since that time, it has become the dharma of the people to support that view of Panditji. Now, what has happened, like in last 20 odd years, so much of documentation has become available in our country, in England, America, Australia, other places, and so many testimonies have become available which were not readily available earlier. Or maybe you can say that people like me tried a lot and we were lucky enough to lay our hands on these testimonies, because don't forget, a researcher like me will be able to work only when we have data to substantiate whatever we are saying, evidence. We will not say, I will not say something here I've been saying for 20 years and nobody has challenged me. People may say whatever they like on Twitter and Facebook. They may abuse me. They may call me agent or this and that thing. But unfortunately, you have to counter me on facts. And one of the reasons, and you cannot counter me on the, which very, often people say that I don't believe it. Mera dil nahi manta hai. अगर आपका दिल नहीं मानता है तो उसकी you go to a doctor's place, but you give me rebuttal on evidence. So what I want to tell you right now is based on evidence. I can elaborate if you want me to. The plain cash theory is based only on hearsay. There were certain claims made by a few individuals that Subhash Chandra Bose had died in a plane crash. There was never any direct evidence. Americans accepted it when they did the first inquiry, and even Pandit Nehru accepted this thing. So there was never primary, no direct evidence. It is all based on statements made by people here and there. And when these individuals were interrogated by the intelligence organizations and subsequently the commission and committee in India, you had so many loopholes and contradictions in their account that nobody, no even a third rate country in a court of law in that country would believe that kind of a thing. That is why even the government of India was constrained to admit this thing in a court of law. Now, very interesting thing is there that whenever in our country we have a non-Congress government, you find some positive steps taken for Subhash Bose, or in this direction of his death. So the first breakthrough, or rather, would say the first big break came when Morarji Bhai became prime minister in 1978. We had for the first, and VP Singh time, big change happened, and with a big change happened when Devi Gowda became the prime minister. And I would say even Narasimha Rao tried to do something different from the previous government, in a manner of speaking. So this is one thing you have to keep in mind, that is every time you have a non-Congress government, there's some development, and it is always based on facts, not because they have some political agenda, but it's a factual thing which the previous government would try to hide. So uh, today we are observing 125th year of Netaji's birth anniversary, and this is also the 75th year of India's independence. So that's why you and me are discussing this matter today, and Netaji is being discussed, and that's why so many things are happening across the country, and they'll continue to happen over a period of time. Now, likewise, 25 years ago, India was observing the 100th year of Netaji's birth, and it was the 50th anniversary of India's independence. So the government of the day was, they had to take, they took steps in those days. And then it so happened that the official theory of Subhash Bose's plane crash death, it holds that Netaji died in a plane crash in present-day Taipei city. His body was cremated there after some time, and then the remains were taken to Tokyo, and the remains are lying in a temple in Tokyo. So people who believed, who supported this line, they began saying around 1997 or before that, look, Netaji has died. You have this controversy about his death going on for so many years. You have had some commission or committee, nothing came out of it. So he has died. Now let's close the chapter and let's bring the ashes to India and make a memorial about erect a memorial in the memory of Subhash Chandra Bose. When this kind of a claim was made, the then Minister of Defense Minister Mulayam Singh Yadav ji unwittingly said he would bring the ashes to India. Once that happens, somebody went and filed a suit in the Calcutta High Court. Now you would appreciate that for a political party spin doctor to come and say something, during an interview is one thing. But before a court of law, especially when the judge is interested in the case, it's not very easy to, you can't do spin doctoring there. Today, you take up your camera, you go to take a bite from a, government, a party spokesperson, and you tell them, look, Netaji case, he will brush you off in 1 or 2 bites, and you will not have time to counter him, because there's no way, because there's no space, there's no time. But it doesn't happen in courts. You have long arguments, and the court wants to see on what basis you are, saying this and that thing. Now, in those days, the Chief Justice of Calcutta High Court was Prabhashankar Mishra. So the protocol, as you know very well, these in India, that the Chief Justice of State High Court is always not from that state. So this is not a, so this Prabhashankar Mishra ji was from UP. I met him, he was in Delhi, he is no more. What Prabhashankar Mishra did, he asked the government of India to state their stand on the case. What do you think? What is your stand? You have done inquiries, etc. So this is stated in the court order that the government council of, and Devi Gowda was a prime minister in those days. Obviously, they couldn't lie. So they said that there's a story of Netaji dying in a plane crash, but the evidence is very sketchy, and the eyewitness accounts are very full of contradictions. So the court ordered, look, you yourself admit there's a problem. Then you have an inquiry done, find out what happened to this person, when did he die, and where did he die, and whether these ashes are Subhash Bose's or not. So this answers the view of the plane crash theory, that the government itself accepted that there was no plane, the plane crash theory was full of loopholes, And that is why because of the Calcutta High Court order, there was a commission formed. A commission came up when Mr. Vajpayee was a prime minister, because he took the call. By the time the court order came, Mr. Vajpayee was in power, he was a prime minister, and Mr. Vajpayee could not ignore this issue because he was very much keen about Netaji. He had been since 1960s raising the issue of Subhash Bose in public domain as a member of parliament, etc. He had a role to play in the build-up also, I would say. So he was a player in the Netaji death mystery. So he couldn't ignore. So the commissioner set up, and because of the court, the court, Supreme Court Chief Justice who just suggested the name of Manoj Kumar Mukherjee to be the chairman of the inquiry, which Mukherjee Commission functioned between 1999 and 2005. And before Mukherjee Commission, the government council took the stand, Netaji did not die. In fact, the commission argument session happened in 2005, many months after Manmohan Singh government had come to power. And they took the stand before the commission, the government lawyer, that there was no plane crash and Subhash Bose did not die. So if I keep telling people, if this issue was not about Netaji, if it were about some urban Naxal, hell would have broken loose in the country, because then the entire human rights lobby would have come around to supporting this cause, and they would have moved heaven and hell to, otherwise. This is, I'm telling the fact of the matter, the government of India itself accepted as late as 2005 that the plane crash story was not correct. And when the same commission of inquiry came out with a view that the plane crash had not happened, there was an somersault overnight, and they said, no, he has died and you are wrong, and so on and so forth. The other theory, which is made very famous by Dr. Subramaniam Swamy and others, is the view that Subhash Chandra Bose did not die in any plane crash in Taipei. He was in Russia after his reported death, and where he was done to death by Stalin at the behest of Pandit Nehru. So this is the view which Subramaniam Swamiji holds, and he publicly espouses, and he has been talking about it. Now, the problem with this, as I look at from the point of a researcher, I've seen the relevant records, etc. All the available evidence right now suggest, including the intelligence reports and credible testimonies, they all show that Subhash Chandra Bose sought asylum in Russia, which was given to him, and he was there. And he was probably there as a guest of the Russians. There is no sign whatsoever of him being killed in that country. So that is one problem I'm facing. When I fail to understand that a person of the stature of and wisdom of Subramanian Swamy should be making such ludicrous arguments. For example, to assume that Stalin killed Netaji at the behest of Pandit Nehru is complete nonsense, because Stalin did not think very high of either Panditji or Mahatma Gandhi. When Gandhiji was assassinated, Russians did not even send flowers for 2 days. Regarding Panditji, what Stalin thought, the less I say is better, because he has used abusive words for Panditji. And for whatever reason, Panditji sent his own sister as India's first mission head in Moscow after independence. Stalin refused to grant her audience. He never met her. The first Indian ambassador who was able to meet Stalin was Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. And there are a lot of stories about him, that he came to know about Subhash Chandra Bose, and people say this is the reason for his meteoric rise. Suddenly, the gentleman who was just a ambassador in a foreign country, suddenly he was proposed as India's first Bharat Ratna awardee and first vice president of India, and eventually became the president of the country. So these are the allegations, have been going on for many, many years now. So the problem that there is a view that yes, Netaji was in Russia, that probably is there, if you ask me. But there is nothing on record to show that he was killed there. Now, which brings us to the Gumnami Baba story, the original question, that there lived a person in UP and whose existence nobody knew. His existence became known only in 1985 when he died. And after his death, his followers began saying he was Netaji. There was a huge uproar in UP. And now Manoj Kumar Mukherjee, Justice Manoj Kumar Mukherjee, the commission, was a former Supreme Court judge. He studied the entire matter. In his commission report of 2005, he stated very clearly there was credible eyewitness account that this man was Netaji. And he had no reason to ignore, especially the views of those who had seen both Netaji and this person. He also admitted that the documentary evidence was matching with the eyewitness account, so to say that the correspondence the so-called Gumnami Baba had with his followers was showing that he was Netaji. At the same time, commission could not accept this man was Netaji because the handwriting and DNA reports from the government lab were negative. And this is where the case closed in those days. Now, what has happened that in last couple of years, we have come up with clear-cut evidence to show that these forensic tests were fudged. So they were fake reports were given by the government experts. So today, if I'm saying that these reports were fake, so the only logical conclusion I would draw that Gumnami Baba was Netaji.
Right. And the evidence or the statements that have been issued so far by different world governments, uh, are there any commonalities that you see in that? How do you perceive a lot of the things that are out in public now?
Uh, Excuse me, which governments have issued statements?
Uh, Especially with regards to any information about.
I mean, are we talking about the Indian government or some foreign governments?
No, foreign governments.
The foreign government, the point is that the Japan has the statement which was made by Japan of Subhash Bose's death was aired on their official video, but it was based on statement given by Indians. And then the problem with Japan, like Germany, they were not the same country after August 1945.
Yeah.
So they disowned their past. Anyhow, so Japan has stuck to that line that whatever theory the line was given, it was there. The Indian government changed its stand. As long as the British were in power, they did not support they were cagey about it, so they were not very clear. But late 1946, when Panditji was still the interim prime minister, he made a statement that Netaji has died, and since that time, he has become the dharma of the entire Indian establishment to uphold as the gospel truth. So the government of India has been more or less making the statement that he has died, plane crash. Muraji Bhai government, created some confusion by making a statement that the eyewitness account is not adding up, and there's some problems in the plane crash theory. Thereafterwards, suddenly there was a change. Congress party came to power in 2004, and they started supporting the plane crash theory. The government of the day today says that their official stand is which was made public a couple of years ago, that the stand of the government of India is more or less that he has died in a plane crash. But in case any new evidence comes, we'll look into it. But the decision about so this is what they say. Now, British government has not made any statement, but we have lot many declassified files from the British side, which would would say that in some files they are saying that he has died, but there are, on the other hand, there are other files which show that he probably did not die. So there are some area of confusion. From the American side, we have documents coming from the State Department because the Americans were the first to do an inquiry into Subhash Bose's death. And that the most important document is that one in which they're saying there is no direct evidence of the death. It's only a statement made by Japanese. Taiwan, for the most interesting aspect of the story, the part of the story is that Taiwan, where the plane crash took place. For certain strange reason, the government of India has never been keen to talk to Taiwan about Subhash Bose. So we did not want any inquiry in that country. In fact, they did not even want Justice Mukherjee to visit Taiwan. It's a long story, but it eventually happened because of some efforts I made as a journalist. And Taiwan government stand was that there was no plane crash for an entire month that point in time. So these are the stands taken by different governments, on Subhash Bose's death.
Extremely interesting. And one of the most common things you may have been asked is if Netaji was Gumnami Baba, why didn't he come out in public? And it would be easy to prove himself.
It was like this is something on which we have, like in our book Chanduchu and I we have written a book, Conundrum, Subhash Bose's life after that. So we would urge anybody and everybody to read that book, and before reading they should go to Amazon or Flipkart, look at the reviews first, because we have answered all these questions in great details. And it so happens that sometimes things are very complex, very difficult for us to answer in 1 or 2 lines or even 50 lines. You have to, when you want to unfold things, and you want to talk about 50s and 60s and 70s, there are multiple players. Now, for example, today, even if I went to UP and asked people about Dr. Sampurnand, I very much doubt people of your age level would be able to recall that who was Sampurnandji. Sampurnandji was the second chief minister of Uttar Pradesh. So without knowing the background of Sampurnand, we cannot make a judgment what he wrote in his book about Subhash Bose and what was his association with Gumnami Baba and so on and so forth. So we have to, like we peel off a layer of onion, one after another. We have to do it. And the reason why this man didn't come out, it's a very complex matter. In simple words, this question was put to him, of course, by people who used to meet him and who knew he was Subhash Bose. And these people were also, some of them were former revolutionaries, one or two were from the INA intelligence services. So these people were aware of the facts and all that. So we have a documented, for example, in an instance when somebody asked him a question, a revolutionary former, asked him this question when Moraji Bhai had become the prime minister of the country. He said, "Why doesn't this government ask me to come out and take your rightful place?" And his answer was, "If I came out, a lot of innocents will die." So this is one dimension of it, that don't forget, if there are 10 people in the country who are diehard fan of Subhash Chandra Bose, Netaji, there are also 20 people in the country who are diehard, Ahimsa ke Pujari. And what these Ahimsa ke Pujari did in Delhi in 1984, I can very well tell you because I'm sitting in Delhi. So it's not going to be that easy that Subhash Chandra Bose will come out one fine morning and everybody will start dancing with joy. No, people will be annoyed because they didn't like him. And even in home state, people used to not like him. They used to call him Tojo's dog or Tojor Kukur, as they call it in Bangla. And so it's not going to be easy for him to come out and say, look, I was there. There are multiple problems. So it seems the reason for his not coming out, not one, there were multiple. And these reasons were effective in different parts and time. First of all, why did he go to Russia? He went to Russia because the Second World War came to an end. Because India has no history. We have barely been able to control a small country like Pakistan, and we lost in Sri Lanka. So we do not know what wars are about. We are people of peace. We don't know anything about wars. Second World War was a very big thing, and you would appreciate that, biggest term of abuse, even today, was to call somebody a war criminal, which people have called Putin today as a war criminal. No, Gumnami Baba or Subhash Chandra Bose was of the impression that he was treated as a war criminal, because don't forget, whoever Subhash Bose had a linkage in Second World War, they either died during the war or they were hanged after the war. So he thought he was a relic of a world order which had no place in the new world order. So he had no option but to hide away, because he was advised, if you get caught by the British, you would be summarily executed, and with your death the freedom struggle will come to an end. So you need to survive in order to continue fighting for the country. Survival is an important thing. So he was there, and he was aware that there are war crimes charges against him. So this was the main factor for him. It was impossible for him to even think of coming out in 50s and 60s. Thereafter, there was a situation like, he didn't have enough support. We have in our book given, for example, an outline. Many people in past, historians and others, have thought about, a scenario. What would have happened if Netaji were to come back to India in 47? And they all imagine there'll be some tussle, and eventually either Panditji or Subhash Bose will take over. But if you put it like, what would happen if Netaji were to return to India in 1951-52, which he actually did. Gumnami Baba came back to India in 1951-52. Now, by this time, situation has changed dramatically from 47. So if Subhash Chandra Bose was around in 51-52, he would have no support. He probably would have a lot of support in 47. But then in 52, he would have no support internally. And then at the same time, you have come out. What will Subhash Chandra Bose do? If he comes out, he will not, come out and say, I want to contest the election of the MLA seat in West Bengal. He's top man, top for the top job. You think a person who has been, who's understood to be a war criminal in the Western countries, who had an alliance with, the Axis forces, and Tojo and Hitler and whatnot, you think the Americans and the British would allow him to become a prime minister of India? Let him function? Would he be given guard of honor if he went to some other countries? It will not happen. So it's very difficult for us to explain. It was not possible even on this charge alone of war crimes that he could resurface. And the world did not change so much. The world has changed only after 9/11, and there were other multiple factors. He tried coming out, but then, the another thing happened which went totally against him. If you believe what he said, but there's another, whether I want to believe or not believe is a different ballgame. But since I accept he was Netaji, he also, came out with this, line that when he reached Russia, and because Russians had saved his life, so in lieu of it or in return, he probably advised them. And this worked very well for him and them. And he made serious allegations against the Indian leadership. He said the Indians have accepted the transfer of power on terms and conditions which will suit the Western powers, not this country. And if I don't do anything, India would become a center of Cold War. And to avoid that, I have to do something. and to ensure that the Cold War doesn't become hot on Indian soil. And then, he said he became part of the Russian covert operations. He was involved in Korean War. He was involved in the Vietnam War, and so on. So these are the claims that he's making. So if any of these claims have any iota of truth behind them, I don't think he was possible. A man who's claiming that he gave Americans a bloody nose in Vietnam War, you think he can come out in 1965 and say, look, my name is Subhash Chandra Bose, I was here and then, and so forth? Becomes difficult. So he would say, when people would ask him in simple words, why are you not coming out? He said, my coming out is not in India's national interest. People of country would suffer. There would be sanctions on our country to hand me over. I'm still the enemy number one of the allied powers. So poor people of my country would suffer because of me. So let me be here. I'm working for the country. And my coming out will not serve anybody's interest. So this is how I would say. So you would appreciate this is not the, you would expect a holy man to talk in such a way. So in one line, he thought his coming out was not in India's national interest because of the circumstances as they were in those days.
The mystery about Lal Bahadur Shastri ji's death also continues now. Kashmir Files has come out, and before that, Vivek ji also directed the Tashkent Files. So I just wanted to have your observations on that, because you've also written extensively about Shastri ji.
Well, it so happens that, that when it comes to Netaji, there are others who talk about it. I mean, I'm not the only one. Of course, I say with pride that what Chandrachud and I have come up with is the best book on the Netaji death case. Nobody will come anywhere close to us. But yes, at the same time, for the sake of the argument, there are others who have done, book on and also Netaji's, death may not be as comprehensive, but others have also written. But in the case of Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, I am the number one in the field of one. I am the only one who has done research. Mine is the only book which talks in detail about the death issue. The reason I was, attracted towards this case was for simple reason. When we were growing up in Delhi, and this goes well even for today, that every time we sit around and we discuss all these mysteries, and especially in political realm, invariably Netaji and Shastri ji case are discussed most often because they both were people who belong to the highest rung of the society. So when I was doing this investigation of Netaji's death as part of Hindustan Times in 2000, and people everywhere I went, people used to tell me about Lal Bahadur Shastri. So much so that even Lal Bahadur Shastriji's family, used to allege that, and they told me in private and others, that this case of Lal Bahadur Shastriji's death is linked to Subhash Bose's case. So in a manner of speaking, that Lal Bahadur Shastri case is deemed to be a part of the Netaji case. Now, Netaji is the largest story, and Shastri issue is a part of it. So this was the reason I was inclined to do some research about it, and I did write something. But unlike Netaji case, there's nothing here. There's no document declassified. Netaji left his imprints all over the world, and here so many documents were declassified. Government was under pressure. Under pressure, they were forced to form a commission, a committee. So there was a lot of data available from Netaji, but Shastriji was virtually nothing. Not even a single book was ever written about this thing. Now the credit for reviving this issue goes to Vivek Agnihotri ji. Agnihotri ji contacted me because I had written some articles about Lal Bahadur Shastri's case, and anyone could make out that I am talking the most sense in those articles, because I had studied and something about Lal Bahadur Shastri's case when I was doing the Netaji inquiry. So Agnihotri ji and his, he of course we met, and he was thinking of making a film which eventually became known as Tashkent File. And I very happily, in national interest, offered that I will give you all the inputs I have on this issue, and then whatever help I can render by way of making you meet the family members, I did, which I did. I'm very happy and glad. And I was thinking, if the movie is going to be out now, and the case is going to be flagged before people of India, it's a pity that nobody has done a book on this case. So I would try and attempt and do a book. So after this thing was over with Agnihotri ji, I thought when the movie comes out, I should. So I did my inquiry, and when the movie came out, I came out with a book, Your Prime Minister is Dead, and which I dare say is the best book, because there's no other book. I mean you would be shocked to know that before me, one person tried, and he tried to come out with a book, but he could not. He came out with a I would say a booklet, 70-80 pages. And the name of that gentleman, I was in Vadodara for a lecture, And I asked people, and this was subsequently published in newspaper Gujarat Samachar. I asked them, "Ki, do you have you heard of the name of Daya Bhai Patel?" And people were clueless because who was Daya Bhai Patel? So Daya Bhai Patel was a member of parliament many terms, and he also happened to be Sardar Patel's only son. So Sardar Patel's only son did an inquiry into Lal Bahadur Shastri's death. He came out with a booklet in which he alleged that it is a murder, and he implicated the government of India in this thing. And this booklet since then has vanished from the Indian libraries. It's not to be found anywhere in this country. So luckily, I was able to access a copy in America. So after Daya Bhai Patel, I am the one who picked up the cudgel, and then I was able to write a far more, because I have much more data available to me today. So I've done a proper inquiry into this case, and this book is there. Again, it's doing very well. It's on Amazon and Flipkart, and anybody who has interest in the Shastri case must read this book, because there's no other book which will tell you the all theories and all the constructs in this entire case. Mind you, my books are to the point. They are, I don't want to name, for example, there have been books, claiming to tell you a lot about the Adolf Hitler's death and all that. But if you pick up the book, you will find that out of 12 chapters, 10 are dedicated to Hitler's life and times. Only in the last chapter, you get some, stray reference, and the whole book is titled about his death. No, so my books, Chandrachud and my books on Netaji, Death Mystery, is totally about death mystery. It's nothing, it's not about life and times. Chandrachud has now written Netaji's separate biography. But then same with the Lal Bahadur Shastri, my book is not Shastriji's biography. The book starts from Tashkent and tells you whatever happened from that time till art.
I hope we can have a separate discussion on the Tashkent files as such on a different day, because these are subjects that you would like to go deep into and discuss different theories.
But to draw the contours of it, there are again, the official government of India view that Lal Bahadur Shastri died of a heart attack because he was in heart.
Yeah.
The counter view which came from his family, especially his late Mrs. Lalita Shastriji, and his Shastriji's mother also, and others, the whole family supports, and so do many followers of Lal Bahadur Shastri, and the death was not natural. He was poisoned. It's a case of murder. Now, first we have to, make a determination whether or not which theory is true. Now, I find a lot of problems with the government version. Some of which are that the government of India lied in Parliament several times on different aspects. They should not have lied. Why should you lie on Parliament? For example, there was an allegation made about a certain cook in Parliament. Many parliamentarians, including those from the Congress party, talked about him. The government gave him a clean sheet when they should not have given him the clean sheet, because we know, eventually it came out that even Russians thought that this man had done something wrong. So when you have such a background, and this person was also arrested by the KGB and interrogated, the fact government of India tried to give him a clean sheet, that means there's something to hide. So there are multiple reasons whereby I think that the government has not been truthful. So that's one problem again. The second thing, as we all know, the post-mortem was not conducted, and there again I have a problem. The government statements are not they're tinged with suspicions, and all the same, whatever data which I could lay my hands on, the official data, I collected the information, and I also collected information coming from the other side, the family side. For example, you take the picture of Lal Bahadur Shastri's dead body in Tashkent, and then you provide the data. So I provide the data about his death. What did the doctors do? What kind of medicines were injected into his body? After he was no more, what did the doctors do? They try to preserve his body by again injecting something in his body. And then you show the picture of the dead body taken in Delhi after a couple of hours or probably a day, and these images are in color. And then you describe how the body was as seen by the family, what kind of cut marks, and body was stiff, it was bloated, and so on and so forth. Because don't forget, I'm not an expert. I'm a lay person like you. We are all journalists and researchers. We're not experts. And then I ran this, the note which I created through 10 forensic pathologists who people had experience of, doing post-mortems and then these kind of studies and toxicology, etc. All of them told me without blinking their eyes that this is a case of poison. So because there are a lot of controversial, this is a controversial matter, not everybody wants to be quoted publicly. So I have quoted 3 or 4 doctors in my book. So they have given their reason explanation. So on the basis of this data, I am convinced that the death as things stand today is not natural. So therefore the theory of the family stands. If you believe that the Shastriji did not die a natural death and that he was murdered or he was poisoned, then there are three different theories. The theory number one holds that he was killed by the Americans. In my book, I have demonstrated it is a cock and bull story. Essentially, we have in our country a mindset for which I have to pinpoint and blame the Congress party. They are the ones who are in the habit of putting the blames on the CIA for everything. Everything goes wrong. Americans are doing this thing. JP's movement was backed by American CIA. All the Indian Americans were CIA agents. Anna Hazare was CIA agent. So everybody is a CIA agent, but at the same time, their own children are living in America. By the way, don't forget that. You recall that Mumbai attacks happened. So Diggy Raja and his some friend chums were spreading this rumor, and openly that this was a handiwork of the CIA and Mossad and IB. God knows which world they live in, but they thought it was a joint operation of the RSS and the CIA, and at the same time, I'm sure Diggy Raja son was sitting in America. So this is a fault of the Americans that they ignore these things and they allow these children of such people to come and settle down their countries and live there. So this is a cock and bull story. It has nothing to stand on. The second theory, which has been talked about, that Russians killed him because Shastriji signed the Tashkent Accord under tremendous pressure, and probably he would have gone back and he would have, disowned it. So that is the idea Daya Bhai Patel is giving in his book. Well, I'm not going to believe it for 2-3 reasons. One is very obvious, natural, which was given by Lal Bahadur Shastri's wife also, that they won't do it something like this in their own home. And don't forget, there are 64 members from the Indian delegation, including our defense minister, our foreign minister, secretaries, all basically virtually the entire top rung of the Indian government was sitting in Moscow. And there were the media from all over the world. Nobody would try and dare do this kind of mischief in their own country under so much of media glare. That will be suicidal. Second and most important thing, if I have done or anybody has done something wrong, we would try to cover it up. We see very clear signs Russians did not try to cover up. In fact, for instance, a very eminent member of Congress party made a statement in Parliament in 1966 when the issue was being discussed, and 70, that Russians suspected this was poison, and they offered a post-mortem, and it is government of India which denied. So then the government of the day said nothing of such sort happened. But later, after 30-40 years, we came to know it was true. So Russian actually offered post-mortem. He actually arrested the cook. So which brings me to the third theory. So there was an inside hand. So my misfortune is that I don't see anything wrong with the American side. I see nothing, in a sense that Russians, I don't blame them. But there is something hanky-panky, something wrong with the Indian side. Because for one, don't forget, we are the people who go all over the world and we keep talking about the virtues of non-violence and truth. So people who are, experts in telling the truth and expert in the art and craft of non-violence, they should answer this question when you were asked point blank in Parliament whether or not Russians offered you post-mortem. Why did you lie? So they offered you post-mortem, you refused. So I have a problem right now. So there is something which happened within India. As things stand today, I do not know. Tomorrow, maybe something else will come up. And again, the problem is that, the only way we can do something about this case, the approach would be probably similar, is to, Russians must have kept a huge, thick dossier about the whole incident. Don't forget, Shastriji died in the country. The KGB was on the job after they did the inquiry, and they arrested the cooks and they did many things. So common sense, they must have maintained a thick dossier on the case. But you and I can't see the dossier because it is lying secret in Moscow. Now, who can access it? My government. So what we need to do is to my government. And don't forget, I keep repeating this thing. The government which stands for the truth and non-violence for the entire world, not just for our country. They should declassify their own papers first. I'm sure the IB must have done a proper inquiry about this case. Declassify your files. Don't give me the excuse which you keep giving for Subhash Chandra Bose, because you keep giving excuses. It was British era, even though there's no difference. The government is same before and after. They were same Rai Bahadur running the government, both sides on the 47. So you declassify your papers and then you ask Russians about their file. So in fact, the government of India is not doing it. So you don't get anything from Russian side.
That is very unfortunate, and I hope that
It
does
is not
happen.
unfortunate. The problem that why the government is not doing it, the problem the government is, if you open the Shastri case, Netaji case will be open. The Netaji case is the problem.
Yeah.
Netaji case is the problem for them, not
because of them being interconnected, right?
Netaji is the problem with the Netaji case. It will, undo the
There
work
were
of
also
70, 80 years of, the brand building will be undone.
yeah.
And the people have everything to gain by this brand name. Because
So it's
I would
become-
request you and your readers to go and on Twitter and Facebook and social media, just go and observe. I can give examples of the kind of, things we talk about, this brand Gandhi, and you will laugh at yourself. I mean, to give example of my own Prime Minister, whom I otherwise support, Prime Minister Modi, either in Germany or Australia, he made a statement that, you can actually, by following the path of Mahatma Gandhi, you can even defeat terrorism. If that is the case, then why do we need Ajit Doval in Kashmir? Then we might as well send somebody from, the Congress party. There's so many eminent Gandhians sitting among us. So Diggi Raja is a very eminent Gandhian. So then let us send him to, Kashmir, and he will resolve the entire problem. If by following the Gandhian path you can defeat terrorism, then what is the need for Ajit Doval to be in Kashmir? Ajit Doval is not a Mahatma Gandhi fan, as far as I know.
Yeah. No, in fact, because of this, there's a web of lies, and then there's constant cover-ups. And unless it's declassified, there is no way going forward. But do you see any sense of optimism? Because I think during the Bengal elections, thoda sa hawa tha ki, the BJP might declassify it because of scoring political points.
My problem is that this is a matter which cannot be answered in bites. People give bites and they tell lies actually. So this, for example, just now you have mentioned about during the Bengal election, there was some buzz. No, there was no buzz. Modi ji did not even take name of Subhash Bose in the Bengal election. The very idea of, for example, that this theory which has been floated that Modi is talking about Netaji, because of Bengal elections is nonsense, because Narendra Modi, the matter, I have been involved in the whole build-up, and it is, you can say, because of me the matter reached him. Modi ji was sounded of Netaji case by his family when he was still the Gujarat Chief Minister. So the letter which was written to him was written by Chandrachud Ghosh and me. So this is in 2013. So in 2013, Narendra Modi was not, he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. So there were no Bengal election in those, and he had nothing to do with Bengal elections. Even prior to that, Narendra Modi unveiled a statue of Subhash Chandra Bose in Vadodara, the main spot there. He talked about Subhash Chandra Bose so many times when he was a Gujarat Chief Minister. So this whole idea that, no, it's not that Netaji is being discussed. Even I would say, even Mamata Banerjee, it's very, childish to say that she has been talking about Netaji for last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but the point is, this is what media does. Now, what has changed? Now, look at yourself. You said you give me hope. Yes, give me hope. When I look at you, I go around and give lectures across the country, and I hope this COVID does not play any spoil sport, because there's been a gap of 2 years now. But again, I'm going to different parts of the country. Is that wherever I go, I find young generation, young people taking a lot of interest in this case. And what has changed, everything is the onset of social media. Because of social media, because of YouTube, you and I can have a long discussion. Do you think this kind of a discussion was possible on Doordarshan? Forget Doordarshan, even on national television, who are private, they will not give you an hour's discussion on with one-to-one, unless until the other person is the president of a country. So what has the ball game has been changed, because now we have people like you and me who are not the elite people. We are not sahibs, we are not Lal Bahadurs. We are not having our desires to put our families in America and Europe. And the point is, people like us can directly approach people. So this gives me a lot of hope. And you see, essentially the young people who are taking interest, I couldn't care less about the elderly, because I find most of them are interested in watching Netflix movies. So they are looking, they are enjoying, they are talking. And the very fact, in a country like ours, which has got a very poor sense of history, we forgot about in 1947 when 10 lakh people died. People forgot in 48 about it. We have very poor sense, especially the Hindus have a very, very poor sense of history. They tend to forget. It has taken us a film as gory as the Kashmir Files to make them realize what we have known for past 30, 40 years. Since 1990, everybody was aware of it. But then this is the medium of film. So that gives me a lot of hope that now people are talking about it. And mind you, my lectures have taken place in IITs. I have and in England and America, in universities where Indians are. So if I can hold interest of people, for example, in IIT Madras for 3.5 hours, if those bright people can take interest, and believe me, the people who heard me, in IIT Madras or IIT Kanpur or other places, today they are sitting in jobs which many of you would dream to get one day in big places in America, and in Microsoft and Google and other places. So I'm getting very bright, people listening to me, giving me attention, supporting me. Of course, that's how my visits to America become possible. It's not because government is not funding me for all these things. So this gives me a lot of hope. Things have changed, and I think I must say this thing to the credit of the government of the day. The good thing about them is they don't mind criticism, and they are not hostile. They have real problems which they have to overcome, and I feel that we have been given a golden opportunity. We must try and build up an awareness and try to convince the government that they must tell the truth, and we can do it. This will not be possible if tomorrow, God forbid, Rahul Gandhi becomes country's prime minister or somebody else. But with Narendra Modi ji and Amit Shah ji, we are hopeful, because they are not hostile. They're definitely for it, but there are reasons which the obstacles which they have to clear. And because, as I said, this issue is very complicated one.
Anuj, I wish you the very best of luck with your journey, and I hope a lot of secrets are unraveled, because this is something that every Indian has a right to know, of how our Prime Minister died, of what happened to somebody like Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And history will thank you, history will remember you for taking this effort and the initiative. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Anuj. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.